You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hello, this is Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. The earliest things that makes it official. Welcome to 16 years and 2,800 episodes of the Chris Voss Show and all that good stuff there. We've got the most amazing authors, of course, as always on the show. Refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1, the TikTok, and all those crazy places on the internet. Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind. Today's featured author comes to us from bookstolifemarketing.co.uk. With expert publishing to strategic marketing, they help authors reach their audience and maximize their book success. Today, an amazing young lady on the show. We're going to be talking to her about her book that came out October 23rd, 2024. Yeah. It is entitled Hearing the Voice of God, The Exciting Life of a Poet. Ivery Savannah is on the show with us today. We're going to get into it with her and find out some of her insights, her experience of life, and all that good stuff. She started writing at 9 years old, writing for her grandma Susie. Whenever she would get mail back home from Louisiana, she would respond for her and answer the letters that she would receive from families. She writes love letters in high school and sold them to girls that had boyfriends. That's the best. I do not have a boyfriend. I did not have a boyfriend at the time to write to, according to the bio here. Welcome to the show. How are you, Ivery?
I'm fine, Chris. How are you?
I am fine. You just made my day. That's one of the funniest things I've heard in a while in a bio. I wrote love letters in high school and sold them to girls that had boyfriends. So that's true, evidently.
Yes, I did. And in fact, it started out kind of crazy. We were preparing for a high school talent show. My cousin and two other ladies were coming over to my house. We had a little dance team that we were doing a little dance step. My cousin got there first. She started rambling through my things, and she found this letter, and she read it, and she begged me for it. Of course, I snatched it from her and told her, stay out of my things. And she had some money. So she, went through her purse, and she had about $4 or $5. And so I said, well, I gave her the letter, and she gave me the money. She put her boyfriend's name at the top and hers at the bottom as if she wrote it. And she came back and said that he loved it. I started writing for her. Word got around, and I ended up writing for 5 girls total.
What? You mind if I ask what year this was? Are women? I guess now there's ChatGPT that guys and girls I know are using. I know guys are using ChatGPT to talk to women on text.
Chris, this has been a long time ago.
Okay.
I've been out of high school 55 years.
Did it continue outside of high school, or was it just?
I've done it here and there for other people, kind of secretly. Because
sounds like a business we should get going on here.
I'm working on it. I haven't got it all together yet, but I'm working on it.
I think so. Because even women don't have a lot of game when it comes to dating. Men have game because, we're used to approaching, we're used to rejection, we're used to flinging it all out there, good, bad, and ugly sometimes, or stupid. And, women will respond with, okay. And you're like, I need some more. But, sometimes they're not interested, and that's kind of the signal. But that's really funny. I think that's just hilarious. So let's get into your book. Give us we need the .coms for you if we could, your plugs. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
My book can be purchased at Ivery's Words of Poetry, and Ivery spelled Ivery and WORDS of poetry.com. My email address is awesomeivery@gmail.com.
And people should know you spell Ivery very uniquely, Ivery.
Yes.
So, and uniqueness is awesome. So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your book, Hearing the Voice of God?
Well, I started writing, at 9, and just the reason I wrote the book was because writing has always been inside me. It's just always been a part of me. And I grew up in an era where children were seen and not heard. So for me to start writing was a voice for me. You know, I had 4 brothers. I had 4 crazy brothers, okay? And in that process, I had to learn to survive. But a lot of times I was just always in the background, you know, by myself. Whenever I was able, my mom would be there for me. She was my best friend. You know, I didn't have any sisters, so mom was there for me. But it was just a lot of time by myself, you know, and I kind of learned to adapt. But writing was my voice. It was my escape. It was my help me to, you know, be who I was, you know, kind of like talking to myself basically on paper.
That's into what I do when I write books and stuff or just write stuff. I'm always talking to myself, and myself goes, I don't know. But this is interesting. Were you inspired by early poets? Was there any authors that inspired you to start writing at 9, or did it just kind of come to you?
No, it was just a part of me. When I started writing for my grandmother, and that kind of instilled it, that kind of started the spark, you might say. But over the years, Maya Angelou was my favorite, you know.
Oh, really?
Yes. And you know, poetry has just been something I've always enjoyed. There have been others here and there. You know, I've written for special occasions. I can write your life story in a poetic form. So that's one of the things that I do, that I offer.
Now, so in this book, how does this, what is the title about? Hearing the Voice of God and the Exciting Life of Poets. Is this a memoir of you then?
Yes, it's basically my life story and the many testimonies of me hearing God's voice. And one thing that I think people would find amazing in the book, and I think it was one of the craziest things that God had ever asked me to do. It was one Sunday I'm sitting in church, and it was like strategically I was sitting right in the middle of the sanctuary, you know, focusing on the message and the pastor. And I heard the voice of God say, "Write Rock Hudson a letter."
Really?
Yes. And I was like flabbergasted, stunned, whatever you want to call it. And I was so like caught off guard with that. I turned around and I looked at the person behind me like, did you hear that? But I got a frown instead of, you know, any type of, so I turned around and I pondered that for a day or two. Write Rock Hudson a letter. It kept going over and over in my head. So I finally said, okay, Lord, what do you want me to tell him? He said, tell him I love him. So I said, I could do that, you know. And at the time, I was working for the district attorney's office in the child support division. And we had a whole wall of nothing but phone books. So we could find all these deadbeat dads all over the country. And so when I did write the letter, and I didn't have a computer at the time, I didn't have a typewriter. I had a typewriter, but it wasn't working. So I wrote the letter on yellow legal pad paper. And then at the time, my pastor had written a book called Healing is the Children's Bread. So when I wrote the letter, I had decided to put the book inside. And I said, Lord, where do I send the letter? And he said to me, he said, silly, the man is at UCLA Hospital. Send it there. And I did.
Oh, wow.
And Rock Hudson signed for it.
Wow. That is awesome. Were there any further experiences with Rock Hudson?
The only other experience was that I got a letter back from Elizabeth Taylor saying, thank you for writing, but send money to the AIDS Foundation.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so Liz Taylor was really something too. I grew up in the same area you did with all those wonderful black and white stars, and the early Hollywood and some of the greatest movies made of all time back then. Seems like they just copy everything and regurgitate it now and recycle it.
That's exactly what's happening.
Doesn't it seem that way? It's crazy. Now you talk about your life as a poet, and have you written a lot of poetry? Are there other books maybe that you have, or have you been just working on your own with stuff?
This is my first book of publishing, but it has a lot of poetry in it. Different occasions where, like for instance, one of my prayer partners and I did a little prayer session in the morning, and she said, oh, by the way, I put you on program to write a poem for our Christmas program. And I said, oh, really? You just do stuff like that? You put me on program and don't even ask? And so she said, yeah. And so I said, how many days do I have? I don't, my brain isn't functioning in that capacity at the moment. So she told me the theme. I said, yeah, give me a theme or something. She said the theme is following the star. So at that moment, after she said, following the star, the Lord spoke to me. He said, the world sees Christmas as though Christ missed us, Christmas. And, they've been trying to take Christ out of Christmas and say Xmas. And anyway, the voice I heard said, it's not Christmas, it's Christmas. He said Jesus had to come. And from there, I got the story of following the star. And you've never read the book, right?
No.
So do you want to hear the poem?
Sure, if it's not too long, because sometimes it'll kind of create dead air if it's too long.
Okay.
If we can short through it.
I don't know if I can shorten it, but
because really a podcast is about conversation back and forth.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
no problem.
If we just straight read, it will.
Right. Yeah. It's in the book. It's in the book.
And we want people to buy the book anyway. But and so is that one of your favorite poems, or?
It's one of many. I have a few favorites. And another instance, I was going to a Mother's Day luncheon. And a friend invited me. So I said, Lord, what do I say about mothers that hasn't already been said? And he asked me a question. He said, the Holy Spirit said, what was in the mind of God when he created woman? So from that, I wrote a poem relating to a tribute to the mother of mothers and to womanhood. And it was about Eve.
Ah, the original mother, as it were.
Yes.
According to the Bible. Yeah, she, I guess we're all related technically from her.
Yes.
I wonder if she has anything in the will for me.
She might.
I'll have to check. I'll check with my attorneys. You wrote that, and then how many poems would you say are in this book, or is there a count on them?
I didn't count them to have an exact number, but I'd say probably 20, 25.
Wow. And why is poems like a favorite format for you? Why do you think that's, an axiom that really works good for you?
Poetry, it has a story. It's a storyline. And I've become good at telling stories. And to tell stories in a poetic form, it seems to be something that people can relate to and that they really, really enjoy. I've had one of the ladies from my church, she's read my book 3 times. And she said each time she's gotten something different out of it. But I received nothing but just fantastic reviews from the book.
That's awesome.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. You're right. It's poems have a really kind of limited sort of, or contained maybe might be a good word, sort of way of presenting themselves and telling a story. I mean, it's a story, just like a short story or like a long story. But, there's kind of a format to it, kind of like haikus and stuff, right? There's, and how you do it. And many times, when I was a kid, I used to love short stories. And I was always amazed how authors could tell a story in such a small format. I was even more amazed when Vine, the app, did it. You had 6 seconds on Vine to tell a story. And I was like, this is stupid. This is only 6 seconds. How the hell can you tell anybody a story in 6 seconds? But visually, they figured out a way. And so the great thing about poems is they have that same sort of power, wouldn't you say?
Yes, they do very much, yes.
And sometimes a great story is one that just gets right to the point, maybe gives you what do they call them, a hook? Or, some sort of tease that makes you go, I got to read the rest of this to find out how it turns out. Yeah.
And poetry has to have a flow to it. There's many different forms of poetry, but the poems that I write are pretty lyric-y, and they flow, and that's kind of what keeps the attention of the reader. It has to flow.
And are they usually, I don't know, what's a good example of like poetry, like song lyrics? Are they usually short like that, or do they run several pages, or?
No. Usually if I'm writing a poem about your life story, I have to keep it in 1 page. Otherwise it kind of gets out of sort. It has
turns
to be
into a book, maybe.
Yeah. A mini novel, but as long as I can keep it on 1 page, everything flows and it always turns out great.
There you go. And so you've been writing all these decades and staying in touch with people. And does it pay better than writing love letters for other people?
If I had been consistent, I would say yes. But I've given away a lot of poems, for birthdays, anniversaries, and that kind of thing. So instead of me going and buying a card for you, I'd write your own personal card.
Oh, I love that. I don't know. Have you seen the guys who they'll be on the streets with the other street vendors and they'll have an old time typewriter there and they make poems for people? Have you heard or seen of those people?
Well, someone mentioned that to me not too long ago, but I personally haven't seen it myself.
Yeah. In fact, I did some photography with one guy. I was very interested in what he did. And we had someone on the show years and years ago, I think before COVID. And he was a poet he carried around this old typewriter, the old. And he would write custom poems for people he met and ask for a tip or donation to write them. And he'd size them up a little bit. And he was so popular with doing it, they invited him on, I believe, the Amtrak or the Union Pacific Railroads to basically ride the cars throughout America and do poems for people.
Wow.
To entertain them on the thing.
Amazing.
And I was like, wow, this is really amazing. And, here we got talking about the technology he uses, which is the old world sort of, typewriters and stuff. And he had a collection of them, and it was a really great story. And then last year when I was doing photography, downtown street photography, I came across this guy, and he had a little table on the corner, and there was a guy across the street playing some guitar with a speaker for money. And there's the usual panhandlers there that, sometimes they have food and stuff. And so he was just there at a desk, and he had this old typewriter, and he would write custom poems for people, like 10, 20, 15 bucks, 25. You could get like a custom poem written just for you. And, he would size you up, ask you a few questions, and then he would put down his impression of you, which I imagine after time you get pretty good. And, you pay him like 10, 20 bucks. And he would make a little poem, and he had a bunch of stickers you could choose from. It was a full feature program. It was pretty cool. But you would come away with this poem. And there was a richness there of cherishment. I still have it. And he wrote this beautiful poem. I had my dog with me, and he wrote this beautiful poem about my dog. And it was just beautiful. It was something that I've really treasured and kept in a safe place, because to me, the personality of someone writing me a personal poem was just, it just felt great. And so I guess there's guys all over that do this now.
Right. Yeah. And see, the thing is, when I do birthday poems, anniversary poems, or whatever, I do frame them, as a keepsake, and I call them my framed cards.
I love it. I mean, the personality of it and stuff. And it's really funny to see them type on this old typewriter, the ones that I saw growing up. And I used to have to type on those too when I went through typewriting class, and they weighed like 500 pounds, made of pure steel and probably uranium and whatever else glowed in the dark back then, plutonium. Why is the keys glowing? You can see them in the dark. Oh, that's the plutonium going there, uranium or something. I don't know. Gotta love radiation. It's great. I soak some up every day from the sun. But yeah, I mean, if you ever get slow on business, there's you can work the street corners, I guess. I don't know if you want to do that. It's a bit windy out there.
I got other little ideas I'm trying to get into action too.
But I love how you make these personal poems, and hopefully those people cherish them and realize the beauty. Yes. And they're almost, people write me all sorts of stuff and DMs and texts and emails and stuff. Oh, Chris, you're great. Okay, great. 50,000 people told me I'm great. Okay. Not sure I'm really great, but if, you're inspired and you like it, okay, I appreciate that. I'm honored. Then I get the emails that call me 4-letter expletives. So there's that too. But it's part of being online and having an audience. But the beauty of the personification, their personality or the personal nature of touch of it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's the value of it, And you hear something that isn't just, hey, you're awesome. It's something that's more intricate and detailed to and applicable to your oneself, I guess, whoever that person is.
When I do something personal for someone, I do ask specific things like, if you were born in the springtime, I could start it off with, on that specific day, birds were singing and, something lively that would go into your birth. And even, I put the parent's name in there and how many siblings or where you were in the lineup, just to make it really, really personal.
Ah, And that just has so much more value, you know. I don't mind somebody telling me I'm awesome. I have a narcissistic ego that needs to be fed a little bit. But you know, I prefer cash though, folks. Just so you know, you can buy me a coffee anytime you want. But yeah, it's just really personal. And so, what was the proponent that made you want to finally write this down after so many years of doing it?
The specific poem?
Was it a specific poem that triggered it?
No, it's just the fact that I enjoy writing, but the purpose of the book is there are a lot of people who don't understand what it means to have a personal relationship with God and to really hear God's voice for themselves. So the many testimonies that I have in the book, some were good, some were not so good. There's a part where it says that the not so pleasant voice of God, where I got scolded by God. You know?
Oh, really?
Yes.
Tell us about that. Give us some more details on.
All right, great.
Did he block you on Facebook or something? What did he do?
Not quite, but
that's good.
If I could have found a hole to crawl in, I would have.
Oh.
But this was a situation where my sister-in-law had moved in with me and my husband after her husband passed away. And in the process of her living with us, my husband moved out and left her with me, her and her dog. And she went to the bank to let them know that her husband had passed away. She found out that there was a $10,000 policy connected to their bank account. Oh. So at the time, I was working a temp job, and I borrowed money. I took a day off without pay to take her back to Las Vegas to get her the death certificate and then take it to the bank so that they could work the insurance part of it for her. And on the way to Vegas, we stopped to get something to drink and to go to the bathroom, coffee and donuts, because we left really, really early in the morning. And when I got back in the car, the Lord began to speak to me. And he said to me, he said, "You act like you are her man, like you're supposed to take care of her. Who asked you?" He said, "I know your intentions were good, but you didn't ask." And at that, it's like I'd never had heard or felt any type of a scolding from him, in that sense. And I had her and a couple of other people in the back seat, and they saw me begin to cry, and they were wondering what's wrong. And I just held my hand up and said, "Hey, just leave me alone." And on the way there, he was telling me that I was out of line and that he wanted her to call on him and not me. So, there's scripture that says, "In all thy ways, acknowledge him." And I didn't ask. I just did it, thinking that I was doing a good thing. And so that was a lesson that I'll never forget. But at the time, if I could have found a hole to drive that car into, I would have.
Oh, wow.
You know how you want to hide? I wanted to hide.
Yeah. Yeah. That'll do it, especially if you piss off God. He's got a bit of a temper too, from what I saw in the First Testament. The first, what do they call that? The first book of the first section of the Bible, the Old Testament.
The Old Testament. Yeah.
He seems to clean up his act. Maybe he's seen a therapist or something in the second part of the book, the New Testament. So then, that's that. It's interesting how this book came about, some of the motivators. So does God keep pushing you to write more stuff and do more things, or where are you at with that?
Yeah, I have a bunch of ideas still inside. I'm still working 8 hours a day. So at my age, I don't have the energy that I used to have. But yeah, I still write. I still do personal things for people. I do want to get out to do more personal. And I have some ideas of getting back into the personal letter writing. It doesn't have to be, like sometimes when I was a kid, and like I said, growing up in the era where you were seen and not heard, sometimes I would want my parents to know what was going on inside, and I would write my parents a letter. So I want to be able to do that. I want to be that voice for kids, for teenagers, for, people who want to say something, but they don't know how to say it. To a husband, who wants to write something to his wife, to a wife who wants to write something to her husband. The letter writing in high school is what prompted me to want to be able to do that for a lot of people.
What a talent to have. I remember I started writing poems in, I think it was 4th grade, and I would read them to the class. I still have one of them. I would type them too on an old typewriter.
Right.
I miss the days of, I don't miss the days. I'm doing a joke, I guess. I don't miss the days of, what was that stuff they used to have? Whiteout. Remember that?
Right. Oh, I do.
Whiteout would prevent
I
typewriter.
do. And
And
now
so
they
when
have it in a tape.
yeah. And now, yeah, you put up there. And I remember there was some times where I wrote stuff and made so many errors and misspells and whatever. And I mean, the page would be like 5 pounds of that white pasty stuff on it. Yeah, so maybe I should learn to spell. That might be good. Or type for that matter. But yeah,
Right.
typing was one of the most important things I ever learned in school. It was the most important thing when it came to ROI and return on investment. So what would you tell other burgeoning or potential poets? What advice would you give them on how to develop their craft and talent and skill in that merit?
Today, things are so much easier because you have a lot of things online that you can go to. I'm just really hearing about GPT chat. You can ask that, and it's just like Google, because believe it or not, when I graduated high school 56 years ago, I went right into computer school. I was the only female to graduate with a bunch of Japanese men in Los Angeles. And my 12-year-old today probably knows more about computers than I do, my 12-year-old granddaughter.
Yeah.
And, we went to the store one night and I'm trying to find an adapter for my Cricut machine. And she said, Grandma, why don't you just Google it? So, it's so much that people can do nowadays of learning how to put their skill out there just by Googling it, what they want, asking questions online. And it really is a lot more inexpensive and a lot of different ways of getting it out there. Because for me, you have to pay for everything, but now it's not like that.
Yeah. You do have to pay too for ChatGPT. It's kind of getting expensive there since it became popular. But no, even with ChatGPT, it does help spark some creativity. I'll use ChatGPT for ideas or creativity. Help me with understand this concept maybe or something like that. And while some people, kind of are concerned that maybe it leans a little too much and takes away our creativity, I find it kind of spurs mine, especially where I can do art. Now, if I want to say, hey, I want a banner for the show or I want a picture for this, maybe a group or something I'm promoting, give me a piece of art piece on that. And then I'll see it and I'll go, I think we should change that. And it really becomes like a partner in doing stuff. So I really like it from that. Does God speak to you about anything funny? Is he a jokester? Is he into comedy?
Oh, yeah, he is.
I hope he is, because he's done a great job.
One of the funniest things, that conversation I had out, I was working for a Superior Court at the time and got home from work, and my oldest was in college. My youngest was just 3 years old. So he's home on the floor after I had dinner, and he's home on the floor. He played by himself very well. He was very unusual child, very easy, always happy. He would sit on the floor and play with himself, play with the toys by himself, and sing to himself. And here I am sitting there watching TV, and I wanted some adult conversation, just wishing the phone would ring so I could talk to somebody. And the Lord asked me a question. He said, Ivery, who has your phone number? And when I thought about it, I started to laugh. And when I thought about it, I said, wow, nobody has my phone number.
Did you get a new phone number? You moved to a new place, maybe?
No, it's just that I hadn't thought about giving my phone number to anybody. So when I said, Lord, nobody has my phone number, he said, Ivery, nobody's going to call.
That's true. It's a little hard to, I don't know. The only people who call me these days, I get about 20 spam calls a day. So somebody's got my phone number, but it's not the right people, obviously.
So what that helped me do is not just sit around idly. I just started writing more.
It's sometimes that's the best way to do it. Sometimes I spend too much time talking to people about stuff instead of doing things.
It's easy to waste time.
Yeah, I have that bad ADHD, really bad. And so squirrel. I can be working on one project and 50 projects later, none of them are done and they're all just started. And then I'm like, what was the original thing I started with?
Yeah, it's kind of got lost in the shuffle, huh?
It does, but it's a great thing when you can master it and write it. Sometimes it's just out of control. And do you have any future plans related to writing? Any other books in the making? Any other thing that maybe you're working on that should come out?
Yes, I have an idea, like I said, about the letter writing, and I'm in the process of getting some legal things handled with that because once I go online with it, I'll have a new website just for that,
Mm.
and it's going to be called Random Thoughts of Love.
Random Thoughts of Love.
Hmm.
That's a great title. So yeah, that'll be fortunate. I imagine you probably have lots of poems in your repertoire that you've written that maybe still need to see the light of day, right? Or
Oh yeah, I do. I didn't publish all that I've written, because number one, I'm the kind of person that if it doesn't hold my interest, I won't finish it, and I
Mhm.
believe that everybody's that way. If it doesn't hold your interest, they're not going to read it. And
Mhm.
I've had one or two people, one of my friends said that when he got the book, he started reading and he couldn't put it down and he read the whole book right away. And he said he really enjoyed it. So that's the kind of story I want. And for me, that's what it has to be because something really long and drawn out, you put it down and you think about it sometimes and you won't go back and pick it up. So
Yeah.
I want to keep them short and sweet just to keep the interest of my readers up.
Mm. As we go out, give us your final thoughts. Anything we may have missed that I should ask you about? Do you do any readings for people publicly? Like sometimes people will hire people to come read or libraries, stuff like that.
I've done that for birthdays, anniversary parties, where I've written poems and then gone and read them, for the party or whatever. And I really, really enjoy that. It's helped me out a lot for people to know exactly how I do things. But the one thing I think is important because of the book is, like I said earlier, is for people to realize how God talks to ordinary people. He's interested in what you're interested in, and He's just there. It makes me think about what it must have been like with Adam and Eve and walking with God in the cool of the day in the garden. It's a personal thing, and for me, when I was first got the book published, I'm ripping and running and doing all sorts of things. And like one evening, I just went in my prayer closet to pray. And as soon as I went in and closed the door and sat down, it's like he just hugged me.
Oh,
He was
wow.
waiting for me. I got that warm embrace, and it was just an amazing feeling. So a personal relationship with God, it can be so rewarding. And I just pray that people would take time to get to know Him and get to have that one-on-one with Him. There's
Hmm.
nothing better. There's nothing
Yeah.
better.
Nothing better at all. That's wonderful. And did you say you have a prayer closet? Is that
I
what I
do.
heard? And is that a normal thing in your religion, or did you set that up as an effective way to do that?
The Bible speaks about having a closet.
Okay.
Going in, close the door, and begin to pray. I've
Oh,
had one for quite some time.
wow. And it's probably a way to give you some isolation from noise and
Oh,
and
yes.
everything else and stuff like that.
Yeah, draw your
Um,
mind in from the noise of the world.
yeah. That must be where Tom Cruise and John Travolta are. They're in their prayer closet because they certainly haven't come out of the closet yet, but we're waiting.
I
That's a
know.
joke about something else, folks. I'll let you. There's a South Park show about that. You can go watch it. But yeah. So give
I'm
us
not
your
crazy about South Park, okay?
now give us your .coms, websites, emails, wherever you want people to find you on the interwebs to get to know you better.
My email for the book to purchase the book is ivoryswordsofpoetry.com. And Ivory is spelled IVERYWORDSOFPOETRY.com.
Cool.
And my email is awesomeivory@gmail.com.
Awesome Ivory. IVE.
All
RE,
right.
folks. Make
Yes.
sure you make that donation. I don't know. I'm just making up words, folks, at this point. It's a poetic license, right? Isn't that
Yes.
isn't that what they say? People always
Yes.
correct me sometimes when I make up shit and I go, it's poetic license. You get away with murder practically. They can't get away with murder. The judge says I can't do that anymore. Poetic license doesn't count as a defense, evidently. But, there's still time. Thank you very much, Ivory, for coming to the show. We really appreciate it.
All right, Chris, I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Order up her book wherever fine books are sold. Hearing the Voice of God, The Exciting Life of a Poet, out October 23rd, 2024 by Ivery, Savannah. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss1 on the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning, consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.
All right, Ivery. Great show. Great